see. Didn't get a notice that it is being recorded.
It does not
Oh.
shows on your end. It shows on my end.
Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, so thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today for the Cabo Verdean language session. These series, the language and culture series, are hosted by the Cabo Verdean,
Center for Applied Research.
Thank you. I have so many things on my mind right now. And the Boston Public Schools Office of English Learners has partnered with them to help us launch the Cabo Verdean Heritage Language course at Burke High School. And so we are really excited for this course to launch in January. And the teacher for the course, Mr. Pedro Santos, who's with us today, will be the one teaching the course. And yeah, and so this professional series was mostly developed to prepare him for teaching the course, but we wanted to open it up to other teachers at Boston Public Schools who work directly with Cabo Verdean students to also provide access to this really amazing information and help you leverage native language and culture to support those students, because we know how important that is for student success. And also the Cabo Verdean Heritage Month is coming up in December. And so we also wanted to highlight some of these series to help us celebrate that. Dr. Amato, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes. First and foremost, welcome and thank you for taking time off your afternoon to be here with us. My name is Abel Jassi Amado. I teach politics at Simmons University. So as you can imagine, this past few days has been rather exciting for me as a political scientist. Though my area of expertise, it's not American politics per se. I focus more on language politics. As Dunya mentioned, I'm director of the Cabo Verdean Center for Applied Research, which is a think tank that brings together a number of scholars of Cabo Verdean ancestry or that have interest on Cabo Verdean affairs, if you will. My colleague is also here, so I'm gonna let her introduce herself, and then perhaps we can go around, we can have a brief introduction. Each one of you can say, your name and which school you teach and what grade you teach. So I'll pass the mic to my colleague, Marlise.
Hello, my name is Marlise Batista. Thank you so much for being with us today. I am a linguist at the University of Michigan, and I specialize in language contact, all kinds of contact outcomes like bilingualism, multilingualism, Creole emergence, of course. And it's a pleasure to be here today. So I'm going to popcorn to John.
Oh, sorry. My name is John Moore. I work at the Burke, I teach at the Burke, and it's junior ROTC. It's leadership education is what I teach.
All right, I'll go with Maddie.
Hi, I'm Maddie. I teach at Orchard Gardens. I teach a second grade sheltered English immersion class to a group of Cape Verdean students.
Great. Katrina?
Hi, my name is Katrina Freund. I also teach at Orchard Gardens. I teach 8th grade ELA.
Christina?
My name is Christina Kelleher-Bianchi. I work at the Burke High School. I'm the 11th grade academy leader and the language assessment team facilitator.
And then I have a digit, 17813.
Pedro Santos. My name is Pedro Santos. I teach math at the Burke right now to mostly Cape Verdean students. So I'm very excited for this new role. And I hope New Year will bring us more light into what we plan to accomplish.
And thank you so much. Thank you, Pedro, for accepting to teach this course, a very important one.
Yes,
and then I believe I have Caitlin.
Hi, yep, I'm Caitlin Cordaro. I teach 9th grade math at the Dearborn STEM Academy. I also am a Fund for Teachers Fellow next summer. I'm going to Cabo Verde, and I'm hoping that this language course will be helpful for that.
Very good. Rui Pina.
Hello, hi. I am at Madison Park Technical Vocational High School. I work with our community, the Cape Verdean community, and a parent in the classrooms as well.
Thank you. David.
Hi all, I am David Moreno. I work as a Dean of Students, Dean of School Culture for the 10 through 12 upper school grade at the Dearborn STEM Academy.
Thank you. Jasmine. Okay, Lindsay.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Lindsay McAfee. I teach English as a new language at the Burke High School. So it's good to see some of my colleagues here as well.
And then the last one I will call on is Sadida, and then I will ask other people to come forward to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Sadida. I'm a first grade teacher at Orchard Gardens.
All right, anybody else? I think I saw Isabel.
Hi, I'm Isabel. I teach at the Haynes EEC, multilingual SCI, K1s, but I started here in a bilingual program. I've been teaching for over 30 years. I was one of the teachers who first started a Cape Verdean bilingual program in Boston for the
Congratulations.
for the little ones, and I also started writing books about Cape Verdean language and with a Harvard University student. So I've been, it's my pleasure to hear anything that has to do with my language. So I'm here just as a resource and to find out, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us today. Anybody else?
She's just joined. I'm Brizette. We are introducing ourselves.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Brizette Lima. It's good to be here. I'm looking forward to the session.
And I apologize. I don't think I introduced myself in the beginning. My name is Dunya Jdera. I work for the Office of English Learners on the instructional team, and I work closely with a lot of our dual language programs. So I have been supporting with the planning and implementation of the Heritage Language Program for Burke High School, and then I will also I'm supporting the launch for the Cabo Verdean dual language program that will be starting with K1 next year.
Fantastic.
All right, Abel. So I think that we can start with the document, with the slides.
So before we start, I want to be clear that these PDs will be very interactive. So feel free to raise questions or to comment along the way. I'm going to share the slides with you, and then we can start our business today. So as I mentioned before, just to give you a little bit about the context or the institution that is behind this PD, Cabo Verdean Center for Applied Research. This is a think tank that includes a number of scholars from different backgrounds. Myself as a political scientist, Dr. Batista as linguist, we have sociologists, we have educators like the case of Dr. Lima, who's also here with us, and many other of our colleagues. And this is one of the projects that we are currently engaged with Boston Public Schools. The idea is to develop the curriculum for the new course, Cabo Verdean Heritage, Language, and Culture. Today, the PD is going to be led by my colleague, Dr. Batista, and we also have Ambrizette Lima, Dr. Lima, I should say, who's also going to assist us. Dr. Batista?
Then next slide. So we are going to go back and forth, actually. So here are the objectives. So we have the objectives, the agenda, so that everybody is on the same wavelength in terms of what we want to accomplish with this PD. So the first objective is to analyze a text about language, generally speaking, and the Creoles. We want to discuss the text to form a common definition of what language is and what a Creole is. We are very interested in finding out what your own ideas are about those terms. And we are going to pretend that you are the students in your classroom. So we are coming to this with a very student-centered perspective. And the exercises that we'll do with you are just suggestions for what you can do with your own students. And we are going to familiarize you with the official alphabet of the Cape Verdean language. We have the Alupec, which is the official script for the language. And you're going to apply that knowledge of Cape Verdean alphabet to produce writing. So don't worry, you know, short paragraphs to see how much you learn from what we're going to instruct you, and as well, you know, how would you have written that paragraph for those of you who know Creole. So we are aware that not everybody here knows Creole, and we are going to make sure that we bring everybody along. And then for us, it's important to also identify with you the different sections of the curriculum, what we have prepared for the course. And the next one, Abel. And then for the agenda today, so we already did the introductions, and then we're going to do two things. First, we want to give you a general idea of what the course is about. So we put a lot of work, you know, in this course. It's I think, you know, a course that every single one of us is deeply committed to. So we want to give you the broad sense so that you can appreciate the nature of the course. But what you're attending today is just the language module, and it's just a snippet, you know, of what we prepared. We just want to give you a sense of how we are going about instructing the language. And then we're going to ask you to fill out a Google form just to give us your language background. What is clear is that a lot of you do not know the language, but are eager to know the language. I know that some of you are going to Cabo Verde next year, so it's important that you're familiar with the culture, you know, and language. So we are going to find out about your language background with that Google form. And then we are going to brainstorm. As I said, as a linguist, I'm very interested about what people think when they have, you know, when the notions of language and Creole come to mind. Do you have a difference between the two? And then we prepared, or rather we selected two texts, one of them about language in general, you know, from a linguist perspective, and the other one about Creole in general. And we would like for you to read those texts, and then we will debrief, see what you got out of that particular exercise. And then we'll have a break. And after the break, we are going to ask you, we're going to give you some prompts. And then for those of you, again, who know Creole, to write a small paragraph based on one of those prompts, using your own script. It can be a script that is based on English or Portuguese, whatever language you are interested in. And then we'll show you a video by Manuel Veiga, who is one of the craftsmen of the Alupec. And again, that's in Criollo, but we'll try to summarize. I have the highlights for you that I can share with the English speakers. And after the video, we are going to introduce you to the script itself. And we are going to ask you to rewrite that paragraph that you had already written, but this time using the Alupec after, you know, you get familiarized with it. So we are very realistic Okay, so we cannot teach you the orthography and the accents in 10 minutes. There is no way. What you are going to do is have another PD just on the Alupec itself, so that we can really help you practice that particular alphabet. But today, the goal of today was really to introduce you to the language module, which I'm going to do in a little bit, and then get to practice a little bit with the orthography. And then, of course, we are eager to hear your feedback. So there will be a wrap up at the end. We really want to know what you think, how we can improve before the children get taught by Pedro, this particular course. Next slide, Abel. So Abel, do you want to introduce the course? And then if you can share, give me sharing privileges, because once I get to the language course, sorry, the language module, I'd like to look at my documents. Oh, you are muted, Abel. You are muted.
Yes, yes, of course I was. That's the beauty of being on a Zoom meeting. Sometimes you mute yourself and you forgot about it. I was saying that the course that we put together, it's called Cabo Verdean Heritage Language and Culture. To my knowledge, this is the very first time in the world, in history, that a course that has been put together that focus on this topic for high school students. Not even in Cabo Verde, you do have a similar course that brings together different themes and different topics. Though the experience of Cabo Verdeans is quite complex, there is no way that we could have covered everything. What we try to do is to bring what are the most salient aspects of Cabo Verdean experience, particularly Cabo Verdean experience in the United States. And you should probably note that I do not say Cape Verdean, I say Cabo Verdean, and there is a reason behind it. Since 2013, the government of Cabo Verde has requested its international partners not to translate the name of the country. So the government of Cabo Verde asked its international partners to use Cabo Verde regardless of the language of their partners. Therefore, I think that we need to honor such a request made by the government on behalf of its people. So the main components or the main modules of the language are the Cabo Verdean language. One of the main rationale, as Dr. Batista will perhaps develop further, of this section is to emphasize how a Creole language, and more specifically the Cabo Verdean language as a Creole language, is a language in its own right, regardless of the fact there is a number of myths and deconstructs regarding that language. And then we have another module which focuses more on identity and negotiation, focusing more on different levels of identity, including gender, social classes, and so on and so forth. That module is particularly connected to the history of immigration to the United States. As you're probably familiar with, there is a deeply historical and symbiotic relationship between those two sides of the Atlantic world, Cabo Verde and United States, and Cabo Verdeans in a way can be considered as one of the historical immigrant communities in the United States, in New England particularly, dating back to the mid 1800s. And finally, the last module focuses more on literature and art, so looking at the main schools of thoughts, particularly in literature, for looking at the key themes and topics developed by Cabo Verdean writers throughout history. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So the next slide. Okay, so this is a very basic overview of the language module. And then I'd like to get into the document to give you the specifics. So we have prepared 3 units. So the first unit is on what is the Cabo Verdean language? And we start, broadly speaking, with the notion of language. What is a language in the first place? And that's why I like to pick your brains with that particular exercise that we prepared for today. And then lesson B is, what is a pidgin, which is one of the first phases that Creoles go through, not all of them, but some of them as they develop. And then lesson C is about the history of the Cabo Verdean language, a very rich history that starts back in the 15th century. And lesson D is about the audience, who this course, is for. It is for heritage language speakers, for heritage speakers of Cabo Verdean, and we hope to help those students really recognize and realize the value of their language, their cultural, heritage, of who they are, period. In terms of Unit 2, we have a section on writing the Cabo Verdean language. For us, it's very important that because Creoles are oral languages, not only oral languages, but sometimes, stigmatized languages, that we make students aware that Creoles are gaining more and more representation and legitimacy in education. You have a lot of Creolophone societies that are working hard putting their language in the classroom. So the way that we entitled it is Creole Education, a Linguistic and Human Right. And the second lesson is about the history of writing the Cabo Verdean language. What you will see in the video by Manuel Vega, he talks about how the early writers, because Cabo Verde has a very rich literary tradition, and the early writers just used to write, in their own script, either basing themselves on Portuguese or, whatever tools they had at their disposal. And so we trace the history, of writing in the language, including poetry, songs, very famous poems. And then we take the audience, the students, all the way, the different orthographic scripts that the language went through before they settled or kind of settled Creolophones in Cabo Verde on the Alupec. And then the third unit is on language and identity. Okay, so what I'm hearing, from Rui, Isabel, Filomena, is that there are lots of fans of the language in our midst. It is so much part of who we are. And then, some of us speak it, natively, others different degrees of proficiency, does not matter. We have our identity wrapped up around this language. And so the first lesson is on Criollo as the expression of Cabo Verdean identity. The second lesson is on code switching as a marker of identity. We want to show that whether you are, let's say, if you're in Boston and you're a Cabo Verdean student, you may be code switching between Criollo and mainstream English, let's say. But if you're in Portugal, you're going to be code switching between Portuguese and Criollo. In the same way that right here in the United States, you have Spanglish, speakers, bilingual speakers who code switch between Spanish and English, or African American speakers who code switch between African American and mainstream English. And every time it indexes, their identity. So that's why we make those connections in that particular lesson. And then we end with language variation in Cabo Verde, because every one of us here in the United States has ancestors that go back to a specific island of Cabo Verde. And on each island, you have a different variety of the language. And with that variety comes a distinct identity. So basically, I'm going to share my screen. Could you please share your screen, Abel, with me?
Yes, I'll ask. Hold on a second. Okay. You can share your screen now.
All right, let's see. Great. Okay, can you see it, everybody? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
All right,
yes,
thank you.
yes.
Thank you. So I'm going to, let's see. So I just wanted to give you an idea of the kind of, so this is an overview because I really wanted to make sure that you knew the breadth and depth of the language module. And in the next phases, you will get the same introduction to the other modules of this course. This is just one module, okay, that you are introduced to today. So the Cape Verdean Heritage, Language and Culture language module. So very briefly, it will take me 2 minutes and I'll be done with this. So in this module, students will learn about language as one of the most defining traits of our humanity. They will learn about the genesis of Pidgin and Creole languages and the particular multilingual ecologies and socio-historical circumstances in which they emerge. They will be introduced to the history of the Cape Verdean language, and we learn about the languages and the identity of both the European settlers, Portuguese, Italian, Sephardic Jews, among others, and the enslaved populations from the Senegambian region that contributed to its emergence and development. They will discover that in Cabo Verdean diasporic communities throughout the world, the Cabo Verdean language has become a heritage language. It certainly is in my case. That plays an important role in allowing Cabo Verdeans to retain their identity, their cultural heritage, and a connection to their roots and the homeland. Students will learn, about several key facets of the Cabo Verdean language, which include its place among the world's more than 200 Creoles, and its status as one of the oldest documented Creoles on record. In addition, students will learn about the history of writing in the Cabo Verdean language and the motivations that guided the various orthographic choices behind the written representation of Cabo Verdean. They will learn to read and write in the Alupec. You won't be able to do that today, but we promise we'll have another session on just that, which is the official orthographic convention of the Cabo Verdean language. They will explore the role of Creoles in education and examine how Cabo Verdean has gradually gained its place in educational programs in Cabo Verde and in the diaspora. So as Isabel, just showed us, a lot of Cabo Verdeans over the years, over the decades, have spent a lot of time and effort putting the language, in the classroom in one way or another. So they will compare the Cabo Verdean case to the choices that other Creolophone societies have made in places like Haiti, with Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao, with Papiamento. And I'm almost done. They will draw connections between written representation and the platform it creates, not only for a thriving literary tradition, because we have one of the richest literary tradition among Creolophone societies, but also for the representation of Cape Verdean in education. Students will find and analyze evidence to support their claims that the written representation of Cape Verdean has positioned the language to be entirely suitable for the scientific and literary study of any subject matter, just like some scholars are doing for Haitian. They will also research to what extent gaining written representation legitimizes a Creole language, because it is an oral language, in the eyes of its speakers and outsiders, by extending the Creole spheres of usage, therefore liberating it from its colonial past and empowering it with respect to the competing colonial language, Portuguese or whatever other language. And students will research the measures and programs that a variety of Creolophone countries have adopted to represent their respective Creole education. And in so doing, students will be led to discover the efforts and outcomes of various Cape Verdean diasporic communities and educators in New England, Portugal, and France in representing their Creole in the educational system of the country in which they reside. A lot of us have been in this business for a long time and should be acknowledged. This module will also familiarize the students with the linguistic categories in the nominal, verbal, sentential domains. For those of you who are going to Cabo Verde next year, I think that this part will be very useful, as it introduces you to the different grammatical components of the language, the rules, the principles that regulate the grammar of Cabo Verdean, like any other natural language. And the knowledge of these linguistic categories, rules, and principles will equip them with the tools they need to discover how the use of Cabo Verdean expresses its speaker's identity And students will explore how linguistic strategies like code switching show the bidirectional influences of Cape Verdean and English, and index students' identity as Cape Verdean Americans. They will be able to examine code switching strategies between Cape Verdean and English, Cape Verdean and Portuguese, and they will compare that to Spanglish, African American English, as I told you. And then finally, they will be able to examine the full extent of variation in their language and uncover the differences between Sotavento and Barlavento, in addition to the idiosyncrasies that each variety of the Cape Verdean language conceals. Every island has its own variety. And then they will uncover to what extent the use of different dialects of Cape Verdean also index speakers' identity, sense of self, and connection to a specific island of Cabo Verde. And they will be provided with a list of basic vocabulary called the Swadesh list that will show the different varieties. So in some varieties, you have a distinct word for the same entity, and they'll be able to compare the same word across the 9 varieties of the language. And then hopefully they will get to discover the rich variation of their language. So basically, this is the curriculum map that we have prepared with guiding questions, big ideas. We've been faithful to the standards, and that's it. And I can stop here. So I just wanted to give you an idea. All right, so I will stop sharing, Abel, and then we can go back to the map exercise.
Yes, of course. So I want just to emphasize that the curriculum that Dr.
Marlies
shared with you, it's still in the making. We at CVCAR folks, we meet regularly, and the idea is to have it complete and to be delivered to the BPS, hopefully very soon. So let me just share.
We meet every Sunday for 4 hours so that they know.
Okay. So obviously, if we are going to talk about the Cabo Verde, geography is very important. I'm sure that you all are very familiar with the map of the islands in West Africa, but we thought to include it just to refresh your mind, if you will. The other map that we have for you, and Marlies is going to talk a little bit more about it and guide us.
Yes, I think that a good exercise for the students is really to make them aware that there are, more than 200 Creole languages spoken across the world. But in the States, so often, if I tell people that I study Creole languages, they will tell me, "Oh, you study Louisiana Creole," and they think this is the only Creole, for American students. And I think it is a misconception that is out there and that we need to dispel so that we show the place of Cabo Verdean among, the world Creoles. So depending on the level of your students, you can ask them questions like, based on color, what are the European languages that contributed to the formation of Creoles? And, you can get an answer from them. I don't know whether I should expect an answer from you. And why are they so prevalent, on this map? Why do you have, so many European languages? And what is the language that contributed the most to the most Creoles on this map? And is the blue, obviously. So you have here a domination of English lexified, Creoles. So these are the kind of questions that you can ask your students to interact with them. As you position the Creole language in Cabo Verde with respect to the other Creoles. All right, Abel, now you can take over and maybe you can turn that into an exercise.
Yes. The other map that we have prepared for you, it's just to emphasize the global dispersion of the Cabo Verdean community, even though our focus is going to be the Cabo Verdean experience in the United States, but we want to emphasize what many folks in Cabo Verde calls that Cabo Verde is uma nação global, a global nation, meaning that you have obviously the homeland in West Africa with fragments spread throughout the Atlantic world. In South America, you have communities in Brazil and in Argentina. And by the way, these are historical communities that dates back to the early 1900s, particularly in Argentina, North America, which you are very familiar, but also in Western Europe and in Africa, obviously, you know, and to understand this historical process of dissemination of the Cabo Verdean peoples throughout the Atlantic world, one may want to revisit some important historical events like colonialism. The fact that Cabo Verde was part of the Portuguese colonial empire for 500 years help us understand the dispersion of Cabo Verdeans to places like Angola or Guinea-Bissau or São Tomé, where thousands of Cabo Verdeans were recruited to work in plantations, in the cocoa plantations in São Tomé. You know, one thing that I like to emphasize, I think I mentioned at the beginning of this PD, it is symbiotic relationship between Cabo Verde and United States. I like to say that the two are intertwined in their respective history. For instance, I like to make the argument that independence of the United States cannot be detached for historical events happening in Cabo Verde. I'll give you one example of that argument. Obviously, you may criticize me for stretching it, but you know, one important naval battle that is part of American Revolution War took place actually in Cabo Verde, the so-called the Battle of Porto Praia, where the British Navy fought against the French Navy. As you know, French were supporting the revolutionaries in the United States. This is just to emphasize the interrelation. But at the same time, I also want to emphasize the history of Cabo Verde in the United States. The very first time that a proclamation of independence was made public, independence of Cabo Verde was made public, was in the United States, here in Boston. Though it did not have any legal or political implications, nonetheless, it is still a historical event. On February 21, 22, 1975, some 25 Cabo Verdeans met in Sheraton Hotel here in Boston. They met and they declared independence of Cabo Verde and they established a government in exile. You know, as I mentioned before, it did not have any political or legal implications. You know, the US government obviously did not recognize them. Nonetheless, it's still an important historical event that show how you know, the history of Cabo Verde is intertwined with that of the United States. I could have brought other examples, but those two should suffice. The objective of this map, again, just to emphasize, is you have a tiny nation with fragments throughout the Atlantic world. And you know, this whole idea of diaspora is very important in Cabo Verdean imaginary, in Cabo Verdean subconsciousness, but also important to its economy. Just to emphasize, for instance, financial remittances still to this day are a huge element in the country's GDP. Okay, you could also throw in the role of diaspora, the role of Cabo Verdeans abroad in processes of democratization of the country, in the process of liberation war, and so on and so forth. So this short map is to give you a little bit of this a complex history of Cabo Verde within the Atlantic world. At this point, I want to ask you if you have any question before we move forward. Is there anything that's not clear, or you simply want to make a comment, please do so.
I have a question for the teachers. I was wondering whether, when we introduce exercises like, the one that I just went over, the previous slide, or, this one, the diasporic communities, do you want us, or would you rather have us ask you questions as if you were the students in the classroom, or just introduce to you some ways in which you can go through those exercises? Any preference? Pedro, I will start with you.
Oh, I didn't get the question. So what do you, the question again?
So I was wondering whether you would prefer for us to introduce to you the nature of the exercises, or pretend that you are a student and ask you the questions that you could be asking your own students.
I would like the nature of the question.
Okay. All right. So that's what we've been doing. Anybody is against that? We can keep going that way.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Moving on then. So I did ask you to write down your email in the chat box. I collect a few of you. If you haven't done so, please write your email in the chat box, because I'm about to send you an email with this language survey that we want to do with you.
And the point of this survey is to get a sense of the language profile that we have, in the class. So it's a survey that you can send to your students, because the likelihood that they're going to be at different levels of proficiency in the Cape Verdean language is high. Some of them will be very proficient, and others, much less so. So that gives you an idea of the range of proficiency that you have in your class, so that you can target the course at the right level.
So I'm going to stop it now, and I'm going to send an email and give you 5 minutes to complete that survey that gives us an idea about your knowledge of the language. You should also note that in the email, there is 2 readings attached, which we shall return to it later in this PD. So I sent you the email now, and we'll give you, say 5 minutes to complete it. It's not long. It's very straightforward. If you have not received it, please let me know.
Hi, this is Isabel. I didn't receive it. I'm gonna write my email again on.
Okay, thank you, John and Isabel. So I sent you the survey.
I still didn't get it. I would suggest maybe if you put the link. Earlier I was on Zoom and I was still not getting things from Zoom, so maybe something is going on.
Okay, that's a good. I will place the link on the. It's in the chat box now in case you did not get it.
Abel, we are getting a question of, so if the home language is English, do they still need to fill out?
Yes, I respond to them. Yes, we still. The idea is to get a better idea about about the teachers we're working with. So I did respond to two questions in the chat box, including a question regarding rating your preferences and proficiency. I'm sorry, if and then it's in your home language. Okay, we should move on. The time is not really, a good friend of ours. I want us to go back to the slides. Okay, so now we want to do more of interactive and symbiotic exercises. We developed some few questions that we want you, pretend to be students, to think critically. Obviously, to define a concept, as you know, it's not an easy endeavor, but we want to engage students to become scholars, and one way of do so is by critically approaching key words or the key concepts in their respective fields. Marlies, you want to guide this?
Yes, so what we wanted to do ideally is to put the students, or yourselves. I mean, when we talked about it first, we thought of using the teachers, as students in small group, and then ask you to brainstorm that whole notion of, language. What are the key components of a language? When you think of language, what notions come to mind? And then do the same thing with respect to Creole. So what are the key components of the Creole? And then compare and contrast the two notions. Abel, can you show the next slide?
Sure.
So what we thought would be a good idea is for you to use a word catcher. So for those of you who know the language, you could use, of course, a criollo, so lingua natural, dialetto. And so can you show them? So do they have access to the word catcher again?
Yeah, I'm going to include, share the link. It's going to be in the chat box.
Mm-hmm. So we thought that we could give you, 5 minutes to be in breakout rooms, just to go over those two notions.
So what we're going to do now, we're going to divide in small groups of 3, 4, and we want you to think critically in terms of those concepts. What are the key features of a language, of a Creole language? What are the key elements when one is asked to define those concepts, and then compare those two terms?
So yes, I can just start reporting on what my group, said. So I had Isabel and Christina, and both of them focusing on language as a mean of communication. But Isabel said, it's communication, oral communication, but also body language and gestures and, clicks and all kinds of things. And she said that when it comes to Creole, it's communication, but also the call and response, type of strategies, music. So she had, other layers to add to the notion of Creole. And also that idea that Creole, with respect to Portuguese, she felt very oppressed by the Portuguese language. And Christina also had Creole in relation, to Portuguese, because people would say it's a dialect of Portuguese. So it was a very interesting discussion. Other people want to share what their definitions were in their group before we move on? But any insights? Katrina?
We talked about the idea that over history, Creoles have been seen as like less than, because they were a mix of a native language and the language of an invading group. But that all languages are mixes of languages, that English is a mix of Anglo-Saxon and French, and the Romance languages are all based in Latin. So this delineation between one language being a Creole because it's a mix and other languages being just a language doesn't make sense, because all languages are mixes of languages and all languages are fluid and all languages change over time.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Right on target. That's exactly what I pass on to my students. Yes, how richly inflected, Old English was, and how much simpler it is, inflectionally speaking now, because of contact, as you said, with French and Old Norse, and totally agree. Thank you. Right on the head.
I have a question for you all. Did you ever thought about defining the concept of language before? Is this the first time that you actually think of? So, and how about unpacking the concept of language? I don't know if you had a chance to unpack it. If you are asked to unpack it, what would be the key elements or the key components of one language, of a language, I should say, without putting anyone on the spot? But I'm really interested in learning from you.
Anything that shares an idea or an action is like, in my head, considered a language. I think a lot of people do narrow it to spoken language, whereas like the whole idea or premise of language is to communicate something that I want to do, or like a feeling that I have, or whatever we're trying to share. And so any way that I can share that is considered language and should be totally considered across the spectrum, whether it's like sign language or a spoken language, or something that's only written and no longer spoken, like all of those things.
Absolutely. If I understood you correctly, Jasmine, you are looking at language more like a vehicle, right? It's a medium to transport feelings and ideas and so on and so forth.
A message. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Others?
But yeah, I think we have to keep going though, Abel, because I realize the time we still have quite a bit to do.
Oh, actually, Caitlin put something in the chat.
Yes, I saw that, the dialects.
That, for example, how people from Boston talk versus people from New York. I don't know if Caitlin wants to say a little more.
Yeah, because I think so. I know that time is not in our favor, but one of the key topic that we want to discuss is issue of language. So Caitlin, without put you on the spot, but can you guide us what you mean with that comment?
Well, it was just building off of what was said earlier about Creole not being a language, and just like because it's changes based on different areas and things like that. So English can sound different based on where you live as well, right? Am I making a parallel?
Yes, the very good parallel in my view, because you're looking at dialectal variation across every language. So I totally agree with you. And then how identity is wrapped up, right? I mean, Bostonian accent, you know, the Bostonians obviously have a very strong identity attached to that accent. So,
right.
Yeah. Yeah, for linguists, we look at language and then dialect and then idiolects, because every person speaks differently from the other. So we look at the individual features as well.
So would Boston versus New York be considered idiolect? Is that what that is, or is that dialect?
So that would be dialect, but each individual speaking, you know, or identified as part of those dialects have their own idiolect, like a fingerprint. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
One of the things, and I know I'll keep this short, but we often talk in one of my language classes is that, and I'm not sure who it's accredited to, but the phrase that language is a dialect with an army.
Yep.
Exactly.
Really
so I love it.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Dunya. So it's Weinreich who said that. So he said language is a dialect with an army and a navy behind it. And he was referring to mainstream English, standard English, presented to us as the, you know, thing to speak. That is just another dialect, but kind of imposed on us, just like Portuguese was imposed on Isabel. So the same type of hierarchy, you know, that are passed on to us, and we are made to believe that there is language and there is a dialect, and the dialect is inferior. In the same way that Katrina said, well, you know, Creole stigmatized because they are mixed, but look at French and look at English, they are mixed. So.
One last comment before we move on, because this is such an interesting aspect of the course. When can a system become a language, so to say? When can we say, oh, we are before a language or we are before a dialect? You know, with some comment against this, perhaps you may want to use the comments made by Dunya. And this is very important, particularly when we look at the case of the language. For instance, people call it dialect. I'm sorry, Caivoran language. Some people call it dialect, others call it language. So when is a system a language or a dialect?
It's ideology, right? It's just a matter of ideological stance. And that's why everything we speak is a dialect, and at the individual level, an idiolect, right? I mean, Jasmine said, anything that you use to communicate is by definition a language. You know, but it can be a sign language, it can be just a code, it can be, Isabel said, body language, that's all part of language. So.
Others, any comments before we move on? I know that we are taking a lot of time in this particular issue, but I thought that is so central to this module.
Well, I think that their students are going to be lucky to have them. They have a lot of food for thought to give them.
So no comment on the language, then we should return to the slides. So the next slide that we have for you, it's for you to engage critically with two pieces of reading. But what we're going to do, we're going to divide you into small groups. One group is going to tackle Azure reading. These are very easy to read and short readings, 2-3 pages. And the other group is going to focus on Winford text. And after that, we have a little bit of exercise. It connects to some of the discussions that you already have. Okay, so I'm going to send you to your respective groups. Let me just stop sharing.
Abel, could you just copy the instructions into the chat so we have the discussion questions?
Yes, that's a good point.
Thank you.
So we the activity one first, obviously you need to do the reading, and then we are going to do the text rendering. I did place the link that will get you to that document on text rendering. If you check your email inbox, you should already have received those 2 readings. Now I'm going to divide you in 2 small groups. So the group of Caitlin, Isabel, Jasmine, Maddie, Merlis, and Sadie, you are going to focus on Azure creating language piece. And the other group, Dunya, Ambrizette, John, Katrina, Christina, and Lindsay, you're going to focus on Winford, okay? So I'm going to send you to your respective room, maybe take 5 minutes for you to do the readings and then the exercise, and then we'll reconvene.
Well-structured language, affects our life. So in communicating, if you say it well, organize it, everybody will understand.
Thank you, Pedro. And that was connected to something Isabel said. Isabel, would you like to report what you said?
I spoke about how the structure of language and the linguistic structure, how it builds meaning. And I really like the example of the lightning, and it's like the tree, and it's, it builds on top of like a layer, and it's creative and from nature. And the whole description of it and how it's described in such a poetic language that's so beautifully done really struck with me. And the fact that that it's there's a sentence though I don't understand, but maybe that could be another time.
Thank you, Isabel. And Jasmine?
Yeah, there was it's 2 sentences that really stuck out to me. Sentences look as though they consist of words in a sequence, but that is not how the human mind understands them. We sense instead of structure in every sentence of every language. And I said it kind of reminded me of how we were talking about code switching and why our brains are able to do that. And because we can still see the structure and understand what's going on to communicate those ideas that we want to communicate.
Thank you, Jasmine. That was a beautiful connection that you made. Thank you.
So before we go to the second group, because we understand that you did not read the other group's readings, just very briefly, can anyone from the first group describe what are the key points or the key arguments of the readings, like in 1 sentence, so the others will know what did you read? Any takers?
I mean, I think it kind of just talked about how no matter how we're speaking, our brain is like trying to understand and decode it. So it will go to whatever extent it needs to understand the structure of whatever is being communicated.
That's deep.
On target.
Yes. Right. Thank you, Jasmine. So now we can move to the second group. You all heard Winford. So the same strategy we want to get from you, what sentence or phrase or word stuck with you the most.
I can share a sentence. One of the ones that stuck out to a few of us was this idea that the term Creole was not first used to talk about language. It says, in fact, it was first applied not to languages, but to people who were born in the colonies, first Europeans, then persons of mixed descent, and eventually all locally born people. And that really stuck out to me, thinking about how language is so intertwined with identity and who we are. I remember when I was first learning Creole, I heard the phrase "Ntapapia Creolo," but also, which means I speak Creole. But there's also the phrase "Mie Creola," to say I am Creole. And that was really interesting to me, that that word was used two different ways to describe not only the language you're speaking, but your actual being, yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lindsay. Anyone else from the second group? Maybe it's just a phrase or a word that got your attention from Winford's paper.
As I was reading it, I was looking more at the numbers, just the years, and I was kind of connecting it to American history and what was happening at what time and where. So I guess as a numbers guy, I was looking more, also the numbers and just the history and connecting it with something I know, which is American history, and just kind of, oh, well, that was happening, this was happening, and the United States, or I mean, they're so intermingled, as you're just like looking at the colonists, and anyways, just very the histories are intertwined a lot more than I definitely thought or knew.
Thank you, John. It seemed that you saw, language and history connection, and Lindsay saw language and identity connection. And thank you.
Absolutely. Again, second group, one of you, if you could just share what you think is the key argument or key points for members of the first group. They did not read your readings, just in one sentence. Anyone? I know it's late in the day. We promised we will give you a break, and I don't think that's going to happen. We apologize for that, but it will be interesting if you could just one of you just present sort of a summary, so we all be on the same page.
The reading just talked about how like Creoles are languages that are associated with another language, but that there isn't a real clear definition of exactly what a Creole is, and that has changed over time because the word Creole to describe the term Creole as a whole across multiple languages actually came after Creole being used in certain language contexts. So it's an evolving term, I think.
So I would also ask, can you envision this discussion taking place in your classroom? Because the point is that this is going to happen in a classroom. Can you see this the protocol working and also having a rich discussion from those two texts. Doable, not doable?
I saw a lot of nodding. So Lindsay, I know you're thinking, and John too.
I am thinking. At first I'm thinking with my particular population of students, I think the language of this text would be very, very tough. And so I would wonder about checks for understanding before we get to that level of, really summarizing and pulling out things that are insightful for us, because I think that's a really deeper level of reading. So I would want there to be some checks for understanding before, but I do think they're absolutely capable of this deep discussion about language, and I think it's very engaging for them.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Okay, so we need to move on. We have about 20 minutes. Let me share.
And I'm sorry, because I'm going to have to leave at 3 minutes before 5:30, because I have another Zoom meeting at 5:30 sharp. It's a guest speaker and I cannot be late, so sorry. But I leave right before the end. Yeah.
So we did that. Obviously, I mean, we should take at least 1 minute break. I don't want us not to take a break. So if you need to stand up to stretch, let's just take a quick 1 minute break before we go to the next section. Okay, so let's continue. What we have prepared for you in the next slide is to do a little bit of hands-on exercise regarding writing of the Cape Verdean language. I understand that many of you may not be totally familiar with the Cape Verdean language or even writing the Cape Verdean language. When we put together this PD, we were told that most of, if not all of the participants would be Cabo Verdean teachers. So that's what we had in mind. But in spite of that, we can still do this exercise.
So what we, sorry.
Well, I think we need to do it because we have a teacher who's going to do this with students. So we definitely want to make sure that we are on the same page in terms of writing in Cabo Verde.
So it's a short essay, short text, 3-5 sentences, not more than that. And you can choose one of these 3 prompts and write about it in Cabo Verdean language, in the Cabo Verdean language.
Using any variation that you know. So
exactly. So you can use any
baseline. It's a baseline. The way you understand how to write, you write it.
Exactly, and it can be very short. So we said 3 to 5 sentences. It can be 2 sentences, and you just pick. Bye-bye, Christina. Thank you for your input. You just pick one of the 3 prompts, and then for those of you who are not from Cabo Verde, then the third one. And but you may not know the language. But for those of you who do, just use any script that's going to allow you to express yourself in Criollo. And then you're going to show you the Alupec, and then we can hopefully retranscribe that short paragraph in the Alupec. So that's the purpose of this last assignment. So Abel, what, 2 minutes for this? Because it's just a couple of sentences.
Yes, yes. Okay. Let's. I see that Pedro is still writing.
Okay.
Time is not.
Time, Pedro.
So the next exercise actually we're going to skip. I'm going to share the video with you. It's an interesting video, but I don't think we'll have time to work on it. That's the perhaps one of the public intellectuals behind the project, Manuel Vega, and he's explained some of the key rationales, if you will, for the Alupec. Alupec, by the way, is the writing system for the Cabo Verdean language. It's official writing system sanctioned by the Cabo Verdean language. So we are going to skip this slide.
So Abel, if I can just give them a very brief summary of the video that you can watch on your own time. But he emphasizes that it allows for the writing of all the variants that I was talking to you about when I showed you the map of Cabo Verde, each island, each variety. It's very economical. It's one-on-one correspondence between the letter and the sound. So instead of having like census, it's the first is the C, the second one is an S. You don't have such, inconsistencies. It's one-on-one correspondence. It's very systematic. But then the big controversy that they talk about is how the alphabet has eliminated the letter C, which is a big deal. Because suddenly, how are you going to write Cabo Verde? It's going to have to be with a K and not a C. And I think for your own students, it would be a very interesting thing to look at how how a letter, that seems to be as harmless as a C can really trigger a lot of controversy when it comes to choosing a script without it. So, and this lady had wonderful arguments saying, well, but my name starts with a C. How am I going to write it now? Is it going to be with a K? Well, I don't want that. So the ideology wrapped up around the C.
So I will include the link on the chat box for you. So moving on, I'm sorry, we need to go to the next slide. And this also, okay. So the last few slides, I mean, we have about, just checking the time, we have about 10 minutes. is to focus on the ALUPEC system. We want to share with you and then do one last exercise. So very briefly, Marlies, if you could just talk about the alphabet.
Mhm. So this is, the capital letters, a small case, but you will notice that suddenly there is no C here because it's gone. So you have all the letters of the alphabet, so A, B, D, E, F, G, H, etc. For this one is the N with the tilde, so it's the ñ sound. So the ones that I want you to pay attention to are these kind of letters which sound is not x, it's not an X. The sound is sh, okay? Chuva, for example, in Portuguese, or champagne, in English. So that X is sh, and its counterpart as an affricate is this one. So if you want to say Genevieve, so not quite, that would be J. So this would be Genevieve, okay? So instead of having a J, you're going to have the DJ here. Also, instead of having the G in Genevieve, you would have DJ. But for this one, it would be the ch sound. So sh sound, ch sound. So sh as in chuva, and then ch as in chon, okay, for the ground. So these are the ones that you have to remember, that instead of putting ch, okay, for champagne, you're going to have to use that one. Instead, with the affricates, it's tx. So
may I ask a question, Marlies? May I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
I just wanted to ask Pedro if he saw any salient differences between the language that he produced and what you have here.
Well, I speak Creole with the Mayo accent. I'm from Mayo.
But we're talking about writing.
Yeah, I'm saying, but it's very, it's kind of new to me, the writing, but the way Vega, I have to point it out that I am proud to have Vega mentioned here because he was my classmate in the Catholic seminary. I see like a part of me today. And he did a great job. And I totally agree with this DJ, LH, and me because it simplifies the way and translate, very well what we speak and what we write. It made a good transition. And it's easier to explain to the students or anyone else.
Thank you, Pedro. And then the other one that I wanted to mention here is the Y, which is E. So that's the one you're going to use if you want to say and, E. So El come, y by. So he ate and left. So that would be, so there are some things that you have to remember like that instead of you just using the I. But there are some radicals who don't want the Y anymore because they think that, hey, we have E. It's, we want an economical system, so we can stick to that.
And he's present, right?
Abel?
You're here.
He's one of them. And then there are also...
Go ahead, I'm
sorry. Sorry, because I'm going to have to leave in a couple of minutes, but that's all I wanted to say is that we prepared a slide for you with the accents, the accentuation, and I don't want you to be, how could I say, stressed out by the accentuation because you can put it in very, very clear terms. For example, I'll just give you a couple of examples. So if you have a tonic, syllable involving I or O, okay? If you have beco, fer, okay, pateta, cumeta, net. So whether it's E or O, you're going to stress or put an acute accent on the E, or the O. So if it's stressed, that's where it's going to go. And then another one that is, more straightforward than you would think. So if you have two successive vowels, as in this case, if you have Saudi, Faisca, Rainha, so whenever you have two successive vowels, the second one is going to be carrying that accent, that acute accent. So it has, and then I don't want to, overwhelm you, but same thing if you have one syllable words, like, for example, fe for faith, po for stick, you're going to put an accent on those monosyllables, on that A or that O. So these are the two that are targeted here. And before I go, I just want to say that for that PD, Pedro, we are going to have, an extra session just on the Alupec, just for practice, so that the students learn to read and write and express themselves using this very economical, very systematic orthographic convention that has become the official script of the language, okay, since the 1990s. So it's been a while. So, but we can put it in a way where the 6 accentuation rules can be really simple, straight to the point for the students, so that they don't feel overwhelmed. Okay, so on that note, I apologize because I have to go. It's been a pleasure meeting all of you. Thank you so much for all the great discussions. I really appreciated those breakout rooms and talking to various people in there. So thank you.
Thank you, Maris. I will see you tomorrow at 5 for our meeting.
Definitely.
Yes. Okay. Bye-bye then. So just to wrap this up very quickly, I want to emphasize that the Alupec is now called Alfabeto Cabo Verdeano, or the Cabo Verdean alphabet. It is just a unified system to write the language. The idea is to have a consistent way of writing the language, to give it more coherence and to make it more logical. So I want to honor your time. We still have one last piece, which is the exit survey that we want to learn from you. How did this PD go? But before we go there, I want to ask you if you have any question whatsoever. No questions? So I shared with you in the chat box the exit survey. I would really appreciate, and we would really appreciate if you could fill it out. It will probably take a couple of minutes, but it helps us with the future PD. As we mentioned at the beginning, there are 3 other PDs on the way that focus on other modules, and we want to make sure that we produce high quality materials for you. You are going to be working with the students.
May I add also that we are going to teach a very basic Cabo Verdean class at UMass. This is not geared toward beginners, but we are planning to teach that beginners course at UMass if you want to really start from the alphabet on.
So with that, we conclude this PD. So again, it was a pleasure to have you here. And I'm going to put in chat box the email of CVCAR
Quick question for you.
Sure.
Sorry. I know you said you sent out the survey. I'm not sure if you sent it out to everyone or just to a private message for somebody.
Oh,
but
yes, yes, you are
I
absolutely right.
didn't get it. And I also see a question in the chat box. Someone asked, will other modules be focused on for heritage speakers? Miss Lima, I think you just made a point that there's a beginners class for Creole at UMass Boston. But I guess the question is, this is a 4-session series, and I'm curious because this one seemed to be more focused for heritage speakers. If others, the other 3 sessions will also be kind of in that lens, and to make sure, just to assess for me as someone who's, you know, new to the game, what if it's going to be useful, or if I'm going to be ready for it.
I think it will be useful. It's going to be on identity. And if you are working with the Cabo Verdean children, it would help you to understand, you know, the duality of who they are once they come here. There will be language pieces, but I think it will be very interesting for you as well. Even more so than this one, because it lends a new perspective for people working with Cabo Verdean children. So you are welcome to come.
Thank you so much.
So David, thank you so much. I did put the link for everyone. You are right. I sent it to one person.
Uh-oh, it's saying they need permission.
I have a question about the course for beginners at UMass. Will we receive more information about that in an email? Because that's something I'm really interested in.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And that UMass course, I presume, will be online, or?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It'll be nice and easy online.
So were you able to open the survey I sent you? No.
I wasn't.
I can. I don't know if it's because it's a Boston Public Schools email that I'm logged in under, or.
Yes, I'm I think that you created it.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And okay, we will resend. We have your, you know, your email. We can always send it because we are really interested in knowing what we can do to improve everything for next module. So we'll send out an email asking for your feedback.
Yeah, so expect an email. I'll try to send it out tonight. So while, you know, these ideas are still fresh in your mind. Other than that, so thank you so much for being here and you know, for sharing your thoughts with us.
Yes, thank you for coming, even though it was, you know, a lot of it in Creole, but, you know, it was great. Thank you. And we hope to see you again for the next one.
Remember that, stay on the line.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.